Since all of the scandals involving Hulk Hogan, from his estrangement with his daughter to the racial controversies, many wondered if there was any sympathy left for him. But when asked directly, The Undertaker made it clear, no. That blunt response carried decades of history. Just when fans thought the feud between Hogan and The Undertaker was long buried, a new piece of heated footage resurfaced online. The clip revealed a tense exchange between the two men, filmed not long before Hogan's death. The root of the hostility stretched back more than 30 years, to one chaotic night in 1991. It was November 27th, Survivor Series. The wrestling world was electric as The Undertaker, only a year into his WWE career, faced Hulk Hogan for the championship. At just 26 years old, The Undertaker was positioned for history, potentially becoming the youngest champion ever. The event was billed as the gravest challenge, and the moment lived up to its hype. But what unfolded would leave wounds that never fully healed, creating animosity that spanned generations. The match itself lasted just over 13 minutes. Both men fought with intensity, and the finish came when Ric Flair slid a steel chair into the ring. The Undertaker delivered his devastating tombstone piledriver onto the chair, dropping Hogan and securing the pinfall. The crowd erupted, and The Undertaker was crowned champion. But instead of celebrating, a storm began to form. As The Undertaker's knees hit the mat, Hogan whispered words that sent a chill down the young wrestler's spine. "Oh, you got me, brother. My neck, my back." The Undertaker later described the sinking dread that followed. At just 24 or 25 years old, he believed he had seriously injured the company's biggest star, the man who had carried WWE on his back for years. For a rookie, the weight of that responsibility was crushing. And yet, it wasn't an accident. It was a setup. The warning signs had been there earlier in the day. The Undertaker recalled arriving at the arena around noon and being surprised to find Hogan already there. Normally, Hogan didn't show up until late afternoon, but on this day, he was waiting. He pulled The Undertaker into a locker room shower area, where private business was often discussed, and began laying the groundwork. Hogan claimed he had a neck injury and expressed fear about taking the tombstone. The Undertaker reassured him again and again, promising he would be protected. He prided himself on safety, on never hurting anyone, and made it clear Hogan would be secure. But throughout the day, Hogan repeated his act. Every time they passed in the hall, Hogan reminded him, "Remember my neck, brother." The message sank in. By match time, The Undertaker was hyper-focused on protecting Hogan. When the moment came, he executed the move with absolute precision. He had Hogan locked tightly, head far from the mat. The instant his knees hit the canvas, though, Hogan started groaning, clutching his neck and back. Backstage, Hogan was rushed off for what appeared to be medical checks. The Undertaker, still young and deeply respectful of the business, was devastated, convinced he had injured the biggest star in wrestling. 6 days later, The Undertaker was ordered to drop the title back to Hogan at the special, this Tuesday in Texas, event. The rookie champion's reign had ended almost as quickly as it began. It wasn't until then that he was able to see the footage for himself. Watching closely, he realized Hogan's head had never touched the mat. The truth was clear, he had done everything perfectly, and Hogan had faked the injury. When The Undertaker confronted him about it later in San Antonio, Hogan offered a flimsy excuse. He claimed that The Undertaker had held him so tightly that he couldn't move on impact, and that's what hurt him. For The Undertaker, it was the final insult. That was the moment he realized exactly what Hogan was about. Manipulation, politics, and self-preservation. From then on, The Undertaker knew the man behind the larger-than-life image. The fallout marked the beginning of a Cold War. The Undertaker adjusted. He never forgot what had happened, but he played the long game, maintaining a facade of respect while always remembering the betrayal. His innocence in the business was gone, replaced with hard-earned wisdom. The lesson stuck with him for decades, shaping the way he approached not only Hogan, but the wrestling industry as a whole. By the 2000s, the roles had reversed. The Undertaker was now the locker room leader, the respected veteran, while Hogan's star had begun to fade. At Judgment Day 2002, The Undertaker decisively beat Hogan for the championship, a symbolic victory that showed how far he had come since 1991. Privately, he admitted there was satisfaction in seeing Hogan struggle later in his career. Watching Hogan stumble through entrances, limited by age and injuries, was a form of poetic justice for the man who had once humiliated him. The irony of their relationship ran even deeper. It was Hogan who had first introduced Mark Calloway to Vince McMahon, setting the stage for the birth of the Undertaker character. Hogan was there when the idea was pitched, when the name was chosen. In a twist of fate, he had helped create the very legend who would later eclipse him in respect and legacy. Within a year, though, Hogan betrayed that trust. The man he tried to manipulate went on to become everything Hogan pretended to be but never was, the moral center of WWE, respected by peers as both a performer and a leader. That contrast between the two men became stark over time. Hogan, who preached to kids about saying their prayers and eating their vitamins, was exposed for hypocrisy through scandals, manipulation, and betrayal. The Undertaker, who portrayed darkness and death in the ring, was revered outside of it as a mentor, protector, and steady hand. Fans and wrestlers alike recognized the difference, and it would all come to a head on January 6, 2025. At the debut of WWE Raw on Netflix, Hogan appeared alongside Jimmy Hart to promote his new Real American beer, expecting the crowd to cheer. Instead, he was showered with boos. It wasn't a fleeting reaction, but a sustained, visceral rejection from a modern audience that knew too much. This generation of fans had access to all the behind-the-scenes stories and controversies. They were no longer willing to separate the performer from the man. The moment went viral, exposing Hogan to a level of public embarrassment he had never experienced before. When The Undertaker was asked about it, his response was short and cutting. Did he feel bad for Hogan? No. He elaborated, explaining that today's fans are informed in ways past generations weren't. They know the truth behind the personas. They know the difference between image and reality. For The Undertaker, the lack of sympathy wasn't cruelty, it was the wisdom of experience. Hogan's downfall was the product of his own choices. Just months later, on July 24, 2025, Hulk Hogan passed away at 71. He suffered cardiac arrest at his home in Clearwater, Florida, and was pronounced dead at Morton Plant Hospital. The death came only weeks after yet another spinal surgery, one of more than 24 operations he had endured in his final decade. The body that once captivated millions was ravaged by time and punishment. Tributes poured in, reflecting the dual nature of his legacy. WWE honored him as a cultural icon, the face of their 1980s expansion. Ric Flair remembered his generosity during personal struggles. Politicians highlighted his influence beyond wrestling. His career numbers were undeniable, headlining WrestleMania after WrestleMania, drawing record audiences, holding championships across multiple eras. By some measures, no one in history sold more tickets to wrestling shows. But the personal side told a darker story. His marriage collapsed amid affairs and manipulation. His daughter, Brooke, cut ties after years of emotional abuse, public humiliation, and betrayal. The reality show, Hogan Knows Best, intended to present a wholesome family, instead exposed dysfunction and control. The infamous sex tape scandal with Heather Clem, the wife of his best friend, shattered trust and friendships. Racist rants captured on tape destroyed his public image. Even in death, his family remained fractured, with Brooke absent from his funeral. For those who knew the full story, The Undertaker's reaction made sense. His lack of sympathy wasn't rooted in bitterness alone, but in the understanding that actions have consequences. Hogan's manipulation, dishonesty, and betrayals had shaped his life and career, and had finally caught up with him. The Undertaker survived those lessons and built his legacy on respect and integrity. Hogan, despite his success, became a cautionary tale.